In this video, I'm going to break down this illustration in 6 simple steps. This drawing is part of my thesis project for Masters, and I won an award for it for creative use of brick in architecture. And let's get started. So the first step of this rendering is to have your model and export your PDF drawing. So I'm using SketchUp for this illustration, and I'm just going to select hidden line style and make sure that dashes are unticked. Go into File, Export, and 2D Export, and I'm going to export that into PDF. Once I open that in Illustrator, I can then organize the file. So I'm going to create separate layers for the context, for the first stage of the drawing, the second stage, and the third stage, because they're all going to be rendered slightly differently. And I'm so excited that this is the first illustration that I've uploaded to Patreon. I've wanted to do this for so long because a lot of you have wanted the full tutorial or in normal speed where you can follow along with me and get access to the project files. So if you sign up to my Patreon, you'll find the 1-hour tutorial of this illustration. It's in normal speed, there's no narration, but you can follow along. You'll also get the project files, the Photoshop file, the illustration file, and this is also just the beginning of my Patreon. So I'm super excited for you to join and let me know your feedback. And thank you so much if you do decide to join. It's obviously a massive support for me. So once I've separated all of the layers, I can now select all of them and adjust the stroke. So I like a pretty light stroke, so I'm going with 0.1. And if you click on here, you can also adjust the cap and the corner of the stroke. So then I'm going to go back and delete anything that I don't want to be in my illustration, or maybe fix some lines. But I'm going to skip that step for you guys because it is very tedious and annoying. So then I'm going to crop this illustration using the artboard tool, and then I can go in the right here and add my own dimensions, and I want it to be a perfect square. And then I'm going into Photoshop and I'm going to create a new file, and because I know that it's a square, I can add those numbers in pixels. You can also go a higher dimension in the pixels if you want a better resolution, but I think that 4K and 300 pixel per inch resolution should be good. And then I'm going into File, Place Linked, and then I can link the Illustrator file. This is the best workflow for when you're creating illustrations, so that if you want to adjust anything in Illustrator, it will automatically update in Photoshop for you, but then you can also have the benefit of using Photoshop for adding any textures or effects and filters, things that Illustrator isn't very good at. As you can see here, I can hide the layers in Illustrator. Once I hit save, go back into Photoshop, it should automatically update, and if it doesn't, you can right click and update the file. So what I want with this illustration is to have kind of a variety of textures and techniques. So for the context, I'm going mainly like a monochrome textures with hatching and cross hatching, a little bit like an edgy style of drawing. And then the stage 1, 2, and 3 to have a mixture of the monochrome texture, but also to have colors. And I think that transition of monochrome and colors should provide a really interesting illustration. So I downloaded this cross-hatching brushes from Brusheezy and imported them into Photoshop, and I can select one of these, change the properties to make them straight, and by clicking on here, the shape dynamics, you can see how it transforms the brush. And then using the magic wand tool, I could select the areas that I want to apply this brush, and then on a new layer I can paint these lines. So I definitely went a little too neat in the beginning, in my opinion. I was just trying to test out the style, but it definitely goes by really quick. If you hold shift, it will make sure that the line is straight, and I really like this technique because it makes it look kind of hand-drawn. You can obviously print this out and do all of this cross-hatching by hand, but I don't have a really good printer and scanner, so this is my kind of work around that. And then I can go back into the corners, add a little bit more lines, make it denser to add more shadow. For the windows, I'm using the magic wand tool again, and then I'm going to add almost like a black or dark gray overlay, because in real life you don't really see windows as blue, you kind of see them dark. So this is kind of more realistic, but I really like this effect in illustration. I feel like it's so edgy. And then I'm gonna add a grunge texture or a chalk texture on top of that, just so that it's not completely black, it has some kind of texture. And then I'm going to create the road, which is asphalt, but I'm going to color that with a dark gray. And then I've downloaded these chalk brushes from Brusheezy as well, and then I can paint over them with a low opacity brush to give this texture. As for the roofs of the building, I want to add some type of indication of what the material is like. So I found this like noise texture which is seamless, and I'm going to add that on the flat roofs. These roofs have a metal finish, so I'm going to use the same cross-hatching brush but making it bigger to create these lines. I'm also adding a little bit of shadow using a color overlay. And I've struggled for so long trying to find like a hand-drawn texture of this tiled roof, but I couldn't find anything anywhere. And I know that I can add like a vector texture on top, but I really wanted this effect to be more like hand-drawn or like sketchy. So a cool trick for that is to add the pattern that you want. So I'm adding this pattern of roof tiles, which is seamless, changing the scale, and once I'm sure about the scale and then I'm happy with it, I'm gonna unlink the pattern with the layer mask and rasterize it, and so then I can rotate it to fit the perspective. Once it's aligned with my drawing, I can then begin the process of turning this picture into a sketch. So first I'm going to rasterize the layer and the layer mask, and I'm going to duplicate it just to have an original in case something goes wrong. And then I am going to desaturate the layer and then duplicate that layer, change the blending mode to color dodge, and apply a Gaussian blur. Radius about 2.5 maybe should be fine. It depends on your image and how much contrast does it have. Once I'm done with that, I can merge all of the layers and clean up the edges. So I really like this effect so far, and now I'm going to start coloring the other stages. Or I'm going to skip this part as well because I'm just repeating the same steps. And to color your shapes in Illustrator, I'm using the live paint bucket. After that, I wanted to add a few conceptual elements, things that are a little bit out of scale, out of perspective, just to kind of tie in the whole project together and also frame the image. So my project is about maintenance and care, and this building that exists in an unfinished state. So there's scaffolding, there's tarp, there's construction materials, there's cranes and stuff like that. So I'm gonna start creating those elements in Illustrator, starting with the scaffolding. So this is another cool trick that I found that you can do on Illustrator. So I'm going to create a rectangle, go into Effect, 3D, Extrude, and then here I can change the rotation to isometric top, and then I can change the depth, and now you have a simple step. Once I'm happy with the depth, I can expand the appearance and then copy and paste it to create my steps for the stairs. And this technique is super cool because you can also create different objects in your drawing. So here I felt like the drawing is a little bit empty, so I wanted to add another building. So I use the same technique to do that. I'm using the pen tool to create these organic shapes that I think really works well with the drawing, which represent the tarp that people are putting together. And then another section of the drawing I felt was empty, so I added this building, and I didn't add any textures to it because it is an unfinished building currently in the site, like it is under construction. So I wanted to add some cranes to it, but I felt like the focus of the drawing wasn't on that building, it was on mine. So I left it as black and white, but I did add this crane element on one of the pods. I created it on the smaller pod, but then realized that maybe for the composition that it would look a lot better on the bigger one. And once that's done, I think the drawing is almost there. And then I can go back into Photoshop and add a little bit of textures, like a grass texture, some noise on some areas just to highlight them and bring them forward. I'm so excited that I've created these people myself. For this illustration, I wanted people that were a little bit artistic because I'm adding like bits and pieces that are out of scale, maybe out of perspective. So I just wanted something to kind of match that style, and I found loads of really good one on various websites, but I didn't find the style that I wanted. So in a TikTok fashion sense, I was like, I'll do it myself. So you can buy these on my Gumroad. color, but I've also created one in black and white if that's something you're interested in. And then I'm going to add some vector people just to give a sense of scale. I've also added trees and cars at this point, and here I'm using the pen tool to create these kind of rope elements because I've added this kind of rope that was, or cable that was bringing the pod down. I wanted to tie that also into the tarp, and I just feel like it's a little bit creative, something different. And this is how the illustration is looking, and I'm really happy with it. I mean, I think this is the most abstract I've been. You know, it's definitely out of my comfort zone to create something like this, but I actually really enjoy this, so maybe this is your sign to try something out of your comfort zone. I'm going to press Ctrl, Alt, Shift and E to stamp all the layers, convert that to a smart object, go into a filter, camera raw filter, and I'm just going to FX and add some noise because I'm pretty happy with the colors and everything else. I'm going to duplicate that again and then rasterize it, and using the burn tool just to burn a few of the edges to make them a bit more darker. Finally add this scrunch texture so that any white spaces in the drawing has just a little bit of texture, and you can add the mask and using the brush to really fade out these areas. I'm really happy with how this illustration came out. I've seen loads of these on like President Medals and Pinterest, and I never thought that I could make something like this myself. So I hope you guys found this video helpful. I will also have the project file and the illustrator file on my Gumroad, so if you do want to purchase this and support the channel, that would be great. But you can also save these files if you wanted to replicate it yourself. And if you do end up replicating this drawing in your own style or your own colors or anything, please tag me on Instagram. I would really love to see it. And also someone messaged me on Instagram saying that my SuperPeer link wasn't working anymore, and that was because I've turned my availability down because of uni and masters. So I do want to let you know that you can book a call with me on SuperPeer now. I'm fully available now to accept any calls, so I'm looking forward to speaking with you guys on there. And with that said, thank you so much for watching. Give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in my next video.